Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today, we are speaking with Alejandra Rodríguez Mielke. Alejandra is the founder of Alejandra Mielke PhD Coaching and Consulting. She works at the intersection of culture and leadership. She is a leadership development and cross-cultural consultant and coach with more than 20 years experience. So we're going to get a lot of wisdom today in the business of making leaders understand that their diverse background is rich, powerful, and unique. Alejandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us. I'm also excited about the topic we will be covering today. So, folks, we will be speaking about leading across cultures, navigating diversity, and global teams. Now, I'm one leader that loves the global stage. I love the fact that we can go to different countries and learn from leaders in those regions, which is very different sometimes from what we see here in the United States. But before we get into that conversation, tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, of course. Well, I am originally from Monterrey, Mexico. I moved to Austin, Texas on August 4th, 2000. I came here to go to UT Austin and work on my PhD. The first half of my career had been education, and then this opportunity presented itself. Well, I actually looked for the opportunity, and I decided to come here to UT, and that opened a new completely field around issues of diversity, inclusion, and I was able to work on the second half of my career, or the second part of my career. I think I'm doing the third part now, right? So I've been working with the Latino community for a long time. I've been in the field of adult education, training, professional development, always trying to move people from point A to point B in that sense of growing, of learning, of developing, of understanding new ways and implementing new ways. And I've been doing that for a very long time. So first within education, higher ed, and now as the owner of my own consulting firm. And I've been very happy. It's very rewarding. I think it's one of the most rewarding things to see how people get insights, learn things that they had never heard before, or understand things from a different perspective. So that is my goal, and that's what I've been doing for a while. Personally, I'm married. I have one kid, a teenager, and we're here in Austin, and I have a Chihuahua, a little Chihuahua, a 8-pound Chihuahua named Spotify. Yes, like the app.
Well, that's wonderful. And you talked about, coming to the United States. I came from the island of Puerto Rico, right? Although Puerto Rico may be affiliated as a, territory with the US, there's differences there, right? We see it immediately when we get into the culture of America and how they do things. So I wanted to ask you right off the bat, can you share a specific example where cultural differences significantly impacted leadership success or failure, for that matter, in an organization? And how was that addressed?
Yeah, I have many examples. I can talk about some of the examples that I experienced because, like you said, I moved to Mexico and I had been in Austin before. I was already fluent in English. I had visited the US many times. You know, we watch the movies, we see the TV shows, we have access to the music. So even though you would think that that culture is very present around the world, right? I still felt this what we commonly know as culture shock, right? In organizations, one of the examples that I hear the most is the fact of, and well, I work with, generally not always, but I work with people who are Latinos, or organizations that have a big group of Latino employees, and that clash between the Latino culture and the American corporate culture is what I focus the most. And sometimes I work with other cultures, right? But I think one of the main things that I see, and an example that I see, is when um, mid-level employees or new managers who had been recently promoted, and they get to these roles and they have a hard time uh, understanding how to be the bosses, right? The boss, how to be the ones who lead, because their way of leading is, we come from cultures, the Latino community comes from cultures where we are very hierarchical. We have a very clear understanding of who is in authority, who is not in authority. And here, sometimes in US culture, things are more equal, more egalitarian. So when they have to face those different understandings of leading, of being the boss, of being the manager, they struggle both a lot with being in a position below the authority, and they have a hard time disagreeing, debating, questioning, producing new ideas. That is very hard sometimes. They feel that it's not the role or their position. And when they become managers, they have sometimes a lot of struggles with, oh, this is not. Um, my role is to tell them what to do. My role is to tell them how to do it right, and they have a hard time understanding that other people might have different ideas. So that idea, concept of authority, of who has the power, can be very difficult for some people. I have a great example of um, a person who went because of a global team, a merchant acquisition. He ended up working in Europe, in a country that has a very egalitarian approach to power, to boss, who is the boss, and he had but he was he went there as a manager, and he really struggled to understand what was his role and why they don't listen to me. He would say he was very upset about that. And one day, his assistant uh, decided to go and have lunch with this person's boss. So he went from assistant, the person that I'm talking about was here, and the boss was here in his eyes. And his assistant decided to go and have lunch with this person. And the person that I was working with could not understand how that person had not told him, had skipped him, and all those things about who has a power, who's the boss. So that is a good example. How is that addressed? And we can talk more about that later. But I think that the number one thing is to um, uh, develop self-awareness, get to know more about your culture, how you see things. Because when you understand how you see things, then you can understand that, oh, other cultures are going to have other ways, right? It's not like only our culture has very specific ways of being. Every single culture has very specific ways of being.
Yeah, absolutely. And as one that has traveled the world and been exposed to different leadership styles across the globe, I see sometimes, for instance, when I'm speaking with a specific person, let's take as an example a person that's from India. They're very upfront. They're very upfront, and sometimes could be like, "Whoa, hold on," you know. But then I go to Puerto Rico as well, and we're questioning things. Right? We're like, why are you doing that? And a lot of people in leadership have a hard time with that because of what you just said. They're looking for, hey, how dare you skip me and have this lunch, I haven't even had the lunch, right? And
with
so
the boss.
with the bus, right? And so there are a lot of challenges when you're talking about that mixed culture and the way we go about things. So, in your experience, what has been the common challenges that you hear leaders, especially here in the U.S., talk about when managing multicultural teams? Because you keyed into a good point there, where it's like everybody has a way of doing things, especially if you're bringing culture into it.
I always talk about three levels that we are programmed to act, right? Or three levels. If you think of a triangle, you can divide a triangle in three levels. So you have the very tip, a middle part, and the base, a bottom part. And so those three ways are going to tell a lot about how we act. So the very base, if you can visualize the very base, is about our human instincts, right? Reproduction, survival, hungry, right? We have those taking care of the young, right? For survival. So that is very instinct. So we have that. All of us have that, right? And then if you go in the triangle, you go up and you think about the tip of the triangle, then we can talk about things that are unique to each of us, personality based, right? If we are more shy or shyer, or we like to talk more, or more friendly, or more extrovert, introvert, that's personality. And we all have some, right? And we all sometimes we're very different from each other. And then if you think about in the triangle, the middle, that's where culture is, right? That's what is ingrained, is familiar. We acquired, we learned it, and sometimes it's very invisible, right? And it's beyond the food, fun, and flags. It's beyond just the food or the clothes that we wear or the colors that we like. Is deeply ingrained. That's kind of what we talk about when we talk about culture. Now, when we put all those elements in the workplace, I always say that I live in a world of, and I quote, I just don't get it. I just don't get it, right? I don't get it why they react that way. I don't get why they did not react the way that I wanted them to react, or they didn't respond. They did that. So that is kind of like the main challenge when it's like that, giving up, like, I don't know how to reach to them, I don't know how to confront them, I don't know. And everything that we do in the workplace, think about, when I train people, I always ask managers, think about the 5 things that you do every single week. Think about that, right? In regards to people, do you have one-on-one meetings? Do you have performance evaluations? Hopefully you have more than one a year, right? Do you have to provide feedback? Do you have to delegate? Do you have to lead a team? Do you have anything that you do? And then we go with the triangle and we think about how those actions might be affected and all that, and in all these three levels, because I think it's when they realize that it's not this abstract understanding um, about what happens differently according to culture, is very concrete things that can be impacted by this culture, in addition to the personality, right? So I think that's when you say what are the main challenges, is in everything that they do, in everything that they do, everything that they do as managers, as leaders, how to motivate people, right? People react very differently to whatever is going to motivate me, is according to culture, right? How do you build trust? Trust is a very different understanding in many different cultures. So that's why I always make clear that everything that you do as a leader, everything that you do, you have to stop, think about it carefully, and question and ask, how can this be impacted differently in different ways by culture? I think that is one of the number one question that I always ask people to ask themselves.
A very powerful question indeed. Now, as you was talking, and in that section of "I just don't get it," right? You could really get stuck in that as a leader. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you now was, as we're trying to maintain our individuality, right? The way we are, our authentic leadership style. Um, how can leaders balance maintaining that authenticity to their style while adopting uh, or adapting to
Mhm,
the
mhm,
cultural
mhm.
expectations of the diverse teams that they are over?
And I get this question a lot, especially with the population that I work with, that is the Latino community. And there is a big conflict in between. How do I stay true to myself? Because if I change my ways of being to adapt to the corporate America, right? In this case, for example, I'm gonna lose myself. I'm gonna disappear. I'm gonna leave behind my Latinidad, or I'm going to leave behind. And I think that's a thing that I always question, because there are many. First of all, there's no losing anything, because who you are, no one is going to take away from you. You can infuse what you do, and you can infuse your adapted behaviors or the new ways that you're learning to do things, because you want to be more effective, you want to be more productive, you want to advance professionally. So that is going to require some adaptability, like you said. How can you infuse those new behaviors, those new ways of being with what you bring, right? How can you do that? And for example, there's a lot in the Latino community. You know this, Enrique. We are family oriented. We are group oriented. We are very personable. We like to build these deep relationships. We are caring. We are very respectful. There are very clear ways where you can bring a little bit of this into what you do. That is always going to be with you. So if you have to delegate someone, you can think about that. How is this going to be impacted by culture, right? If I'm leading a multicultural team, and how can I ensure that I can bring some of my caring nature, or some of my simpatía or personalismo, or some of that into the activity of delegating. So it can be done, and it's essential. I think for me, is something that is essential to understand that we need to adapt. I completely agree. But in adapting doesn't mean that you have to leave completely behind. Adapting doesn't mean changing 100%. I'm going from black to white, or from white to black, right? It's not that uh, complete 100% 180-degree change. It is being very aware of what you have, being very aware of your strengths, of your superpowers, and ensure that those are present, right? That those are non-negotiable for you, that you're going to use them. And sometimes you might use them a lot, and sometimes you might use them less, but it's important for to keep in mind that if they're important to you, right? The way that I am a Latina, no one is going to take that away from me. It's impossible, right? I have learned a lot, and every single day I learned how to do things differently. And I have learned, like I said, a lot, but I've always bring what I know is good from me to the activity, or to the task, or to the context where I am.
Yeah, that's very powerful, and something that a lot of us may struggle with. And I'll give you an example. So I was born in Puerto Rico, right? So hijo de la isla, right? But my mom went to New York, and I was 5 years old. So I grew up in the New York City school system, and I learned English. Spanish was my only language at that time, and so I learned English, and then I learned it enough that I was able to join the service. Now, I was originally hijo de la isla. I grew up in New York. I become a common day American citizen and joined the service. In the service, I wasn't American enough. They couldn't understand my accent, right? And then I go back to Puerto Rico, and now
And you're
eso
not.
de allá afuera. and, and so, you're trying to maintain some type of identity, especially now when you could talk about leadership, and so if
Hmm.
as an individual you feel lost, like I'm not either from here nor from there now, because you have to adapt. And I think that what ended up happening to me is that instead of adapting, I adopted. And it's two
Hmm.
different things, right? I adopted something that wasn't mine and then try to make it mine. So that disrupted my identity. And so you have to be careful in leadership to
And
do
I
one.
and I think that is completely true, but I think there is a lot of, oh, in my perspective, a lot of power in understanding that we have access to two systems of making sense of the world, right? As bicultural people, like you and me are bicultural people, we can go back and forth to our countries. I go back to Mexico and I come back and I go this and this, but we see it as, or I see it as a superpower, that biculturalism, be by way of seeing the world. And we have to understand that it might feel uncomfortable sometimes, right? But we have to appreciate and love that thing that we have and not everyone has. So we are more. We have all this power. And I love talking about this because yes, I feel like, oh, there is no, but at the same time, I have access to these systems, two systems to make sense of the world. So I try one way, and if it doesn't make sense and that I does not, I go to the other way, and then I go back and forth in this expanded world that I have access to. So I see it like that, and I think about it like that, and it, believe me, I mean, it's hard to leave. Like I said, I left Mexico August 4, 2000. I will never forget the day that I left my country, and I can drive to Mexico in 4 hours, so I'm not like on the other side of the world, and it still is difficult. But I have learned to appreciate that power and magic that I have because now I have two. I have two. And I was very intentional in doing this for my kid. And I'm very intentional in telling my people, my clients, it's like you have that power. And in that beautiful balance is when you're going to find that power that we need you to have because we need more Latino leaders in this world. So it's a power. It's a superpower.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm smiling because that's exactly how I end up seeing it now. But as I was going through, still trying to find, and I think that it was tied specifically to acceptance, right? I was not on the island anymore. So I was trying to get accepted by the group there. And then I'm going to the military, I'm trying to get accepted there. And without realizing that, just like you said, we have something that a lot of people don't have, and
Mhm,
that's the
mhm,
ability to
mhm.
tap into two sources all at once, right? And sometimes that has to be cleared up in our head as we're trying to navigate that. So great way to sum that one up. So as we're going through, what strategies or practices do you recommend for leaders to develop cultural intelligence? Because if there's anything that I've seen really hamper or bring in trouble to leaders, is that they're not willing to become culturally intelligent.
Mhm,
And that is a
mhm,
thing
mhm.
to enhance their ability to lead effectively.
Yeah, it's like, and I had just collaborating with another person who has a team in Spain, and they're doing business with here, and you can imagine they have some issues, which I find fascinating, right? Anthropologically speaking, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's not understood. Is So it's definitely hard. I talk about four things that you have to have very clear when you want to be culturally competent, right? So that's my model, and that's what I teach, and of course, it's based on research and it's based on what we know about cultural intelligence. But I created my own model, and I talk about four things. So number one is you have to start with disposition, and by disposition is like doing a very clear check. It's like, what is my disposition towards this kind of work? Why do I want to do this? Why is it important? How would it help my team, my organization, my company? What is my willingness, right? There are some people that, because of whatever social context or where they grew up, they have more disposition to learn about others, to understand different perspectives. I think people like me, for example, that I came from Mexico, that I will always we have this need to be continually learning because we have to keep progressing. So I think that's an ingredient in this disposition. So number one is disposition. Why? What? Why is this important to you? And have a very clear understanding, right? It's like, why? Why is this important to you? So that's number one, because without disposition, nothing else is going to happen. So then the next one is knowledge. We have to learn about other cultures, and we have to be willing to have contact with other cultures, right? A very respectful contact. We have to be willing to read and maybe watch a movie that we would have never chosen, or go to a museum that we would have never thought about going, right? Is that knowledge we have to learn. It does not mean that we have to have a list of, well, in China they do things like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. Or in Mexico, no, we don't have to go to that level, but at least have some uh, idea and some disposition, again, right, to learn, to really go and inquire. There's so much knowledge, there's so many things that sometimes we don't have access to, so that we really, I encourage, and we learn about other cultures. That was number two, learning. And then the next one is emotional intelligence. I bring emotional intelligence to the game of cultural intelligence, because we need to understand our reactions when we are faced with difference. And we have all felt it. And I don't want anyone to tell me that that is not true. We have all felt the hole in the stomach, in our stomach, when we see something that is different to what we know or do, or what is tradition for us, right? We feel the shock, and we need to understand why is that emotion there, and we need to learn how to manage those emotions, how to react in better ways, how to control that, so we can adapt our behaviors, right? So that's the third one. And then the fourth one is adapting. Like you said, it's time to edit our actions. It's time to audit our processes, our policies. It's time to think about, how am I going to act? How am I going to say hello? How am I going to engage in relationships? How am I going to make friendships? How am I going to interact with others? So that's when you are very intentional and very purposeful in what you do, in your actions, based on all the knowledge, based on how you manage your emotions, and based on the disposition that you had to do things differently.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier an example of a person's company getting acquired, then all of a sudden now you're in Europe, right? And so that could be a huge shock, not only by the practices of leadership, just by being in that position. And so, with the increasing trend toward, being remote or having to assimilate to a global team, which maybe before you didn't have to. How do you see the role of cross cultural understanding evolving in leadership? And what skills do you think will be essential for future leaders?
I mean, and this is not going to stop, right? The world is getting smaller and smaller. Our teams are getting more and more diverse. So there's no turning around. I mean, it's not, nothing is going to stop this. Generation Z are 49, 48% kids of color. Generation Alpha, the next one is 51, 52% kids of color. So teams are going to be more and more and more diverse. We can work from here, and teams in China, in Egypt, and everywhere. So that is a given. So the I think one of the skills that we're gonna need the most, I think, is one that is self-awareness, understanding more about who we are, right? That knowledge piece, self-awareness, understanding what we bring, again, how we're gonna react, to be prepared for that. So that self-awareness is gonna be very important. But I think the top skill that I think we're going to learn continue, because it's not going to surprise you, Enrique, when I say it, I think is listening, active listening, and strong listening skills. We struggle so much with that. When I train this, and especially around these topics, people are thinking on ways to defend themselves. They feel like they have to defend themselves, right? They have to have the argument ready. So when they're listening, they are preparing the answer. They are thinking about what am I going to say, right? So they have to listen. And for listen, you have to really stop, slow down. We live so fast. We have to be clear in what we want to listen for, right? Trying to have objectives, like use that skill as a very concrete skill and learn how to listen. Because when we listen, then we can be better at solving conflict. We can be better at learning about other cultures. We can be better at controlling our emotions. So listening is something essential and is so hard. We cannot, this immediate world where we live, where we have access, immediate access to everything at the touch of a finger, that listening that takes time is becoming a very difficult skill to learn and to practice.
Yes,
So,
those definitely at the top of the list. And I just heard listening not too long ago. So no, it didn't surprise me. And to be honest, I started podcasting about 6 years ago. It was on the premise that a survey indicated that leaders needed to listen more. So that was 6 years ago. Here we are 6 years down the road. We're still talking about listening, but it will definitely be at the top of the list for every leader, regardless of where you are. So now you mentioned earlier working with folks abroad, working with different diverse teams. So what do you have coming up, and how can the listener or viewer get a hold of you?
so I'm in LinkedIn a lot. I love LinkedIn. I made great friends in LinkedIn. I learned a lot through LinkedIn, so I'm there. Alejandra Mielke, I'm always there. Please follow me, go chat with me. I'm there. My website is alejandramilke.com, so that's another way to reach out. And I am doing a lot of work with. I'm just trying to make managers be stronger managers, especially those managers that have very strong technical skills like in construction or in tech. I'm trying to help them bridge the gap between those technical skills and their people leading skills, because I think it's only fair that we teach them that. Those skills are usually not taught in schools, are usually not taught anywhere. If you're lucky, you get a good manager and you learn from them, but sometimes you can get very unlucky and get a very bad manager and learn very bad things. So that's what I'm doing. I also work with El Puente Institute, and we have some activities there for Hispanic Heritage Month. So also go to El Puente Institute, the LinkedIn page, or the website elpuenteinstitute.com to see what we have there for Hispanic Heritage Month.
Absolutely. Now, folks, we'll have all those links to everything on our video and our description so that you can get a hold of all that she is doing. And I also will add the link to the Latino Leadership Playbook, which is something
Oh,
that
yeah.
is accessible to everyone so that you can get your hands on that as well. And today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, the Outlier Project, and dooko. And if you learned something interesting about the topic covered today, please make sure to subscribe and let us know. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests to add to our show. So if you know of someone or would like a topic covered or featured in the podcast, be sure to let us know by leaving an email at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And this podcast is brought to you by StreamYard, a browser-based tool that lets you live stream to platforms and record podcasts in studio quality. And we're using it to record this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.